Welcome to week 2 of Early Childhood Education Exceptional Learner. I wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of this week and answer some questions for you, hopefully through this presentation. So you're going to have a discussion like you do each week. There's actually 2 this week, and one is just sharing some of your information. So you have a traditional discussion. Please remember to always participate across 2 or more days. I know that can be a challenge sometimes, but what we really want is for you to be able to have more of a dialogue. So if you post your first initial response and possibly start discussing with other students in this class early in the week, and then wait 2 or 3 days, jump in again. Hopefully by that point there has been more discussion that's been occurring, maybe more questions or comments related to your original post, and you can have more of a dialogue. So that's what we would like you to do at least 2 times during the week, jumping in for the discussion. Your second discussion this week is going to be this piece right here, preparing for observation or paper. So one of your major assignments this semester is to either observe an inclusive classroom, and I will give you some ideas, I wrote them here, of places that you might want to contact and see if you can observe. I'm looking for more than just a class that maybe has one exceptional learner in it, but really a program and a philosophy that is inclusive in nature, that does an awful lot for all of their students, including students with disabilities. So you can either observe a program, which would be my preference if you're able to, only because it means so much more to be able to see that in action and hear about what's happening in early childhood for students with disabilities firsthand. Or I realize that doesn't work for everyone. You can certainly also write a paper, but then it's going to be doing more research, finding several articles, books, credible websites to write a paper on. So you're going to submit your initial notes, your initial plans. We're looking to 1 to 2 pages with your general questions, maybe things you want to ask, your plans, your notes, any articles or books that you found if you're going to do the paper. Okay. You can get more information on that in that initial Getting Started tab as well. So one discussion is simply just posting several paragraphs, a page or 2 worth of information on what you're going to do for your paper or what you're planning on doing for your observation. So part of that this week is probably researching, if you haven't done that yet, researching either for a paper or researching where you can go to observe. Some possible places to look, one would be Head Start. Hopefully you noticed in your chapter this week we're learning a lot about laws and protections for students with disabilities still. And in this chapter as well, it talks about programs like Head Start that earmark a particular portion, at least 10% of their students, as students that have needs related to disabilities, and kind of early access to schooling to help with getting them going with all of their support. So you could call a Head Start, make sure that they have some students as well that are currently enrolled that possibly you could learn more about as well. Not the students per se, but what types of programs and offerings they have for those students. Ball Swan is in Broomfield. That's a wonderful program that's been around for many years that's inclusive. Same with TLC Learning Center. It used to be called Tiny Tim, and that's up in the Longmont area. It's another wonderful program that's been around for many years. I believe it's pronounced Sewell. Child Development Center, another program that's been around for many years. And if you have one that you know of that I haven't listed here, certainly you can go ahead and present that information to me and ask for permission. And assuming that, again, a big part of their program is focused on inclusion and they do some specialized things for their students with disabilities there, that would be okay also. Typically we're looking for 10% or more of their students having disabilities and additional services. The last assignment for this week, and I was just going to show you a little bit more here. Here's a little bit more on the paper. So you're sharing your initial plans. Where are you going to go? What are you hoping to observe? What questions do you want to answer? Make sure that you bring with your program observation form. That is in that Getting Started tab, or your initial plans for writing your paper. So additional information is right here as well. Share your initial summary notes, list the journals, the websites, and so on, and maybe a brief summary of those if that's the route that you're going to take. I know it can be trickier in summer for many people, so please know that either option is great. The second major assignment for this week, here, I'll put some yellow on it. This is the one we're talking about now, the universal design environment. So you're actually going to create, that could be with clay models, that could be with sketching on paper, that could be with a computer program. There's a lot of programs on computers that help you design a room, and a lot of those are free. You can also draw that. So you might be drawing circles that represent tables, or a kidney shape that represents a kidney table, squares that represent chairs. You're making essentially a map of a classroom. I apologize for the noise here. And the big focus here, because I've done this assignment in ECE 101 as well, but the focus was more in general on different learning centers and so on. For this class, I want you to be thinking about how to design not only your lessons for all learners, but your classroom for all learners. So we're going to be thinking about things like accessibility. So, something that's going to be easy for all children to access, not a barrier for anyone because of a wheelchair, because of an impairment. Make sure that there's enough movement within the space, that there aren't prohibitive areas. So that might be having larger doorways, having ramps versus stairs that all the children can use, things like that. Aesthetics might seem kind of funny. Aesthetics is kind of the beauty of the room, but thinking about beauty and functionality. So make sure that the size of everything is appropriate. And for students with different impairments, they might have fine motor struggles. We might need larger size instruments in the classroom as far as larger size things that they can manipulate. Make sure that there's enough space again. Make sure that the lighting works well for not overstimulating or understimulating them. Make sure that the temperature is appropriate for all learners. And also think about stimulation again in general. Having a little less, a little more beauty, and not having too much in a classroom. I think that's the main thing I see happening in many classes that's not a good thing for many learners, and especially our learners that might struggle with attention or things like that. Make sure that there's not too much in the classroom, too much on the walls, too much in terms of just in their everyday experience. Just finding the right amount, and usually less is more. And then make sure that it's functional and adaptable. So are there things that are adaptable if there's a writing center for a student that might need help physically? Could there be a speech-to-text recognition? Could there be, for a student that's nonverbal, some PECs or vision, cards that show pictures of what they're wanting or needing versus having to speak it? So think about ways that all students can communicate, and your lessons and your classroom can adapt. So that might be having a bit of technology in the classroom. That might be having pictures for students to be able to express themselves versus needing to express themselves verbally. Certainly eliminating safety concerns, and think about different ways that they can communicate and learn. So the big word here is differentiation. How do I individualize? How do I make a lesson that maybe all of the students are primarily doing one thing, but then I have another student that might be functioning 2 or 3 years behind those students, or they might be a couple of years ahead cognitively as well? What are some of the things that I can do to give the same lesson but at their level? Let's look at, so when you think about models, again, you could draw that out yourself, or you could use a computer program. I'm going to use 3 examples here. So we're looking at 3 models or examples to review. Think about the strengths, think about the weaknesses. I always like that PEP model, which stands for what's one specific thing that's positive, what's an area to encourage or to change or to develop further, and what's another positive. For a couple reasons. One, we know that it's best whenever we're thinking about our own work and environment, and also when we're talking with children or their parents, to focus more on the positive, but always be looking at ways that this could be further improved. So here's an example. This is a computer-generated model. Let's pretend that this is one that you designed or someone designed for the class. So we're thinking first about some positives here. I see lots of different areas. I see some windows for aesthetics and some plants for aesthetics, so that's all great. I also see some more active, creative movement areas and a circle area here. So those are positives that I see. An area that I would encourage, it looks a bit busy. And I think for students with wheelchairs, possibly there's not enough space, right? There's also not enough space in general for movement for, I think, young learners. Another area that's a positive that I would include, I should say one more area that I would probably, that less is more, that aesthetic piece, I would probably take some out of the environment. For one last positive, I really like the different sections set up in the room. So again, think about when you're going to create a model this week and write down a paragraph about, or so, it's okay if it's more, about how you're meeting the learner's needs with that model. Here's one that's been drawn, and I'm sorry, we get it pretty good. We can see we've got a manipulatives area, we've got a housekeeping area, we've got a blocks area, a loan space. So let's start with some positives. I like the centers that are in here. And it also seems like there's more space for students to learn in, which is terrific. An area that I would encourage, maybe think about more aesthetics. Could there be more plants or nature infused? And could there be a bit more, I'm looking at this alone space, which I love, but I'm wondering if we could find a bit of a bigger area for that, for some quiet space. Again, there's more than one right or wrong answer here. You're not needing to see the exact same things I do, but I just want you to see some different models and think about, if we're going to critique this and talk about how it meets different learners' needs, how might we do that? One last positive. I'm seeing a sensory table. We could write about how that's good for all learners. We could also talk about the science center and the class pets and how that's teaching some of those social skills. So think about how it's helping different learners. You might want to address as well that we thought about the space that would be needed for a student that needed more space or needed more time to decrease their sensory input. And here's one last, for instance. This is just obviously a picture of a classroom. A positive here, I love all the space. I'm just going to start there. We have to think about many students need more space. An area to encourage. I can't tell from this photo anyway where some of the different centers are. I would love to know if there was a quiet space or a technology area, and maybe some PECs, which are picture exchange communication systems. You can get those electronically or that's what I'm looking for, in paper form, but where a student could possibly use that to communicate. I do see a lot of visual stimulation here. There might be a little bit less that could be taken away, or a little bit more that could be taken away here. Overall, though, more positives. Love the lighting. Think about if the sky's the limit, we're not worried about finances. If I could have a classroom with all this lighting, it would be a great thing. I also love this dramatic play area. So think about these classes, how you design them to meet all learners' needs, and that is a bit about universal design. So when you hear folks talking about universal design for learning, that's something that we'll circle back to at various points. How can we make sure that all students' learning needs are met? And in this instance, we're talking in particular about universal design in the building design and what types of things are in our environment to help all learners. I look forward to talking with you this week. Make sure that to remember, if you need me, to send me an email, and if you want a more immediate response during the week, it's no problem at all to send me a quick text also. I really look forward to continuing to work together. Bye-bye.